What is up? It's been, I don't know, a couple weeks since I did a video, so I thought I'd do another one. I did make a little more progress. Let's see here. I have both downpipes done now. Let me walk over here. I have the driver's side in finally. You can see where I had to clearance the fender to clear the pipe, which is no big deal. And I did the same thing with the dump for the wastegate. Clears my master cylinder. I'm going to bring the lines back and tuck them in. I may put some little heat shield or some heat wrap around the brake lines, but they'll tuck in out of the way all right. Let's see. And it dumps in the same place at the same angle as the other side. Pretty close to the firewall in the frame too, so I'm going to put some thermal barrier on the firewall. I've had a couple people ask me if they're going to rubber knot. When I cut these pipes and I fitted them, I did so with the wheel cranked all the way in at full lock, so I would make sure I have plenty of room, and then I made sure there's plenty of room up top, so if the vehicle is at full lock and I bounce, it's not going to hit the pipe, so we're good there. Decided I'm going to change the way the oil feed lines for the turbos are going to run. They're long enough I can tuck them back this way, so just gets them away from the heat even more. And the same thing on that side. I'll use some P-clamps up under the wiper cowl where you can't see them and drop it down behind the motor. But the exhaust is done. Wrapped. No more welding. No more fucking around with it. Let's see here. And I did find radiator hoses. I was actually worried about it because I just didn't feel like digging through 3,000 hoses at every parts store in town. But the first shot I found, actually the first hose I looked at was perfect. I need to get my thermostat housing, but this is an 1.5 inch hose, and they make a straight 1.5 inch water outlet. So I'll just have to trim this hose down a little bit, and it'll fit perfect. The upper hose, I'm not quite sure what it's off of, but it fits. You can see I don't have a lot of room there, so I think I'll be alright. I don't think it's going to hit the clamp. Worst case, I'll just clamp it back here and we'll keep it away. This is a Camaro pump. I just looked up like a 2002 SS, and then I used the water pump spacers so I could use the truck balancer with this bracket kit that I have. I think I showed that in one of my earlier videos. But the upper hose clears the charge pipe, and it comes over here. I found another hose. I ended up just cutting it down to keep it back as far as I can from away from here. I'm probably still going to wrap it, but I need to get my filler neck. These trucks had a remote filler neck that was in the upper radiator hose, and it was like right about here. It was the highest point in the system. So they make one that's 1.25 inches on both sides, so it'll set right here. So I'll just cut these, and my filler neck will be right here. The overflow hose will be real nice and short, and it'll just keep it all compact. Those will be done. I still need to order my steam tube kit. I'm just going to run the front steam tubes. Everybody says run four corner. You don't have to. There's guys making like 1,400, 1,500 horse. Just run the front ones with no issues, so I'm not worried about it. I can't decide if I'm going to use the plug down there in the spacer, or just drill and tap and dump it into the top of the water pump. I think I'm going to do it here just because it's a higher point in the head or in the system. So I think I'm going to dump it there. It'll keep it nice and neat and tucked away. And then I'm going to tap into this port, into that port most likely, and run the hose for the remote hose for my cooling system pressure transducer. So the reason I'm doing that is so I can data log cooling system pressure. So if I'm starting to push a head gasket, I'll see it in the log where the pressure spikes in the system, and then I'll know the head gasket's starting to go. So it's just a early detection. You don't always catch it, but if you pay attention to the log, sometimes you can catch a problem before it jumps up. So that's what I got done under the hood. Let's see here. I have my part of my wiring kit. This is the Speedway 22 circuit universal wiring harness. I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put the fuse panel. I got the carpet out, the seats out. You can see the floor is wet. The damn heater core leaked when I was still driving this. And I parked it in, and the carpet's just held it in there, so I'm letting that dry. I took all the carpet out, took the seats out. The factory carpet won't be going in, neither will the padding, neither will the firewall insulation. I'm going to run the thinnest, lightest carpet I can with no padding under it. For now, I'm going to put the stock seats back in, but I'm not going to put the center because I'm going to actually move my shifter. I'm going to make a bracket that will go in between the seats where the armrest was, so I'm not reaching down, so I can just have the shifter right there. It'll just be more ergonomic. And I'm starting to get ready to make the patches for the firewall. You can see over there and right there. And then I need to make a patch right there for the wiper cowl. You can see inside the wiper cowl. You can see where I clearanced the cowl for the old setup. I got the throttle pedal and the brake pedal out of it. I'm getting ready to modify the brake pedal I'm going to move the pivot point on the pedal arm. Here, I'll show you. Maybe make it a little easier to explain. This is the brake pedal. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grind this off the back and take this pin out. And I'm going to move the pin up. I may even move it up into here. I'm not sure yet. And what that does is the higher you move that pin, the more leverage you have pushing. So if I move that pin up, using the same amount of brake pedal, the same amount of force on the brake pedal, it's actually applying more pressure, which is what you want with a manual brake setup like I have on here now. So if I just adapted it over to this without moving this pin, I wouldn't have an ideal pedal ratio, and it would take a lot of force on the pedal to stop. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I got the throttle pedal off. I'm not sure how I'm gonna have to modify this to make it work. I'm really thinking about just making a new one with some pretty slick pedals. I am going to I'm also thinking about going to cut the pedal pad off itself, and they make some really slick ones they use in dirt track cars where they have reverse dimpled grips on it, so it grabs your shoe so your feet won't slip off. Yeah. Let me see here. That's about it for out here. We're gonna run up in the house, and I'll show you some of the other. And we're back. We are in the room. I don't know what I call this. My work room. My geek lair. Here's some partial pile of parts for the wiring and some of the components. We'll start over here. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep the factory Dakota column. This is the factory wiring harness for the column. because my kit, let me reach over here. That's around here somewhere. My kit came with a GM style ignition switch. So I'm thinking I may replace the factory Dakota column with a GM style ignition switch. So it'll be lighter weight, it'll be easier to wire up, because otherwise I'm going to have to go through these, which is, I mean, it's not a huge deal, but I think just using the harness that's already designed for it would be cleaner and much simpler. Otherwise I'd have to go through and figure out what wires what and try to make it work, which, I mean, I'm not entirely opposed to doing. But I still haven't decided yet, and I kind of need to, because I don't want to start wiring the truck until I'm certain on which column I'm going to use. And I'm also trying to decide if I want to go ahead right now and order my fiberglass dash for it. So if I do that, I have to know if I got the stock column or the aftermarket column. So I need to get some choices made. Let's see here. Some more wiring that came with the kit. So, got your power, got your alternator wiring, your starter wiring, your ground. Let's see here. This is one of the LC2s. This is the controller for the wideband O2. I'm not sure I'm going to use these. A lot of guys use them. They have luck with them. They're made by Innovate. I think I'm going to go with the 14.7.com. They make a really killer wideband setup for just 4 megasquirt systems. It communicates over the MS CAN bus system, and you can actually run up to 8 individual widebands on it. So you could have it, each cylinder have its own individual wideband. I think that's probably the route I'm going to go. Let's see here, the factory turn signal switch and headlights or wiper switch. Once again, if I don't use the factory stuff, the factory column, this will go away. The factory headlight switch. If I do the aftermarket dash, I will use this switch, which is just a typical GM push-pull switch. Otherwise, same as with the column, I'll have to go through here and rewire this. Let's see here. This is something else I'm not sure I'm going to use. This is an autometer 2-channel pyrometer, basically just an EGT. Doesn't communicate with Megasquirt. It just stands on its own. It uses 2 K-type thermocouples, which my hot side pipes, which I showed in an earlier video, has the 1/8 inch BT bungs in it just for that. So I'm not sure I'm going to use this. I already have it, but DIY Auto Tune sells a real nice EGT kit that also communicates over CAN bus with the MS. Kind of leaning towards that. So I may sell this. Let's see here. I used this. This was just a cheap 12 volt to 5 volt power inverter that I was going to use to power the Raspberry Pi Dash setup. And then I found these and started using these. This is the Mosberry auto shutdown switch. I made a video a while back. I made a couple videos showing this and why you would want to use it and how to use it. Let's see here. I've got more of these coming, but I'll show you what these are. This one here's 100 amp. These are solid state relays. They do the same thing as these. These are 40 amp mechanical relays. This is 100 amp solid state. Now, why you would want to use solid state, this is a 10 amp with a heat sink on it. Why you would want to use solid state is they're more reliable. There's no moving parts in them. These have a magnetic coil that moves. It moves a little arm, a contactor in there when power is applied. So if it has moving parts, it's bound to fail. I mean, these can fail too, but they're far less likely. Chrysler and a lot of people have been using solid state relays now for 15 years at least. One good point about these is, let's say you have a radiator fan, a fuel pump, or something like your dome control solenoids for your wastegates. You can use what's called pulse width modulation, where basically you can turn these off and on extremely fast. I mean, you can do it hundreds of times a second if you wanted to. And if you tried that with a mechanical relay, you would burn it up like that. So versus these, they have no problem with that at all. They do get hot, so that's why you can get the heat sinks. I'm not going to use the heat sinks. Instead, I found out in my pile of stuff I have this piece of aluminum. So I'm just going to mount 3 of the relays. I'm going to have fuel pump, radiator fan, and dome control for my wastegates on there. So this will just act like a big heat sink and pull the heat out of them. So let's see here. This went to my wiring harness kit also. This is just a bunch of connectors, relay connectors, my flashers, bunch of butt connectors. I'm not really a fan of those. I prefer the heat shrink style. My Mega Squirt, this is a MS3X. This comes from DIYAutotune.com. They have a couple different versions in the same case. You can get an MS1, MS2, they have an MS3, and then they have the MS3X, which adds a connector. It's basically a daughter, what they call a daughter board that plugs in on top of the existing board inside the ECU. And it gives it more features. Instead of running batch injection where you got bank 1, bank 2, and wasted spark, you can run individual spark, and you can run sequential fuel injection. So it has some other features in there too. It's a really good solid system for the money. You're going to spend twice as much on an ECM to get the same features. I think I'm probably, with the harness and the system, I'm still, with the 2 harnesses, I'm probably still under $900. So that's a killer deal for a system that can do everything this can. The learning curve, it does have a bigger learning curve, but the software, Tuner Studio by Phil Tobin, EFI Analytics, really good software. So very, very powerful. You can make it do basically whatever you want. Let's see here. This is the MS3X harness. This is what they call a DB37 plug. You'll see you can get like the MS3 Pro, where it has the amp seal connector and it's all potted and it's smaller. A lot of guys prefer that instead of these big bulky, and these are bulky connectors. They stick out, they're not as pretty. I prefer this because if I have a problem, I can actually open the ECU up myself and probably fix it. I can modify it, and I will modify it. I have to add the knock sensor circuit on here, so there's actually a kit for $90 you can buy. You open this up and you solder it on top of the board, and it gives you dual knock sensor capabilities, so I can use the factory knock sensors on my 5.3. Here is the standard Mega Squirt harness. Now you can wire in a whole engine with just this harness. You do not need the MS3X. The MS3X is if you just want more capabilities, individual spark, you want sequential fuel injection and all the other stuff. But you can use just this harness. In fact, I have another harness here from the earlier project. Same thing. I mean, somebody could take this harness right here and splice it into their factory wiring and have a car running. So, and then I did go buy 2 more harnesses. These are just the wire bundles. These don't have the DB37 on them. And the reason I bought these were like 45 and 50 bucks a piece. So I got like 95 bucks in them. And the reason I bought these is these are 8-foot harnesses, but I'm going to put all the electronics on a removable plate on the back of the cab behind the seats. So I wanted to make sure these were going to be long enough to reach everything up in front. Like the coils are mounted up right behind the headlights. So that's going to take a long harness, and I didn't want to just go to the parts store and buy wiring and add it on and then have to keep track of the color change or the color coding. So with these wire bundles, if a wire, has this color combination on it, it'll be that same color combination from point A to point B. So it just makes it a lot easier to keep track and if something happens in the future. Some of this stuff is stuff I took out of the truck that I may use and may not use. Things like this. This is just a bus bar. And what I would use this for, and I probably will reuse this, just mounted it behind the dash, is have the battery come in on one terminal. The other terminal will go to the starter. One to go to the panel for the panel feed, and then maybe have the alternator go to the other one, or run that to a remote jump terminal up under the hood, which is something I need to order also. That way I can jump start it from under the hood even with the battery in the box in the bed. These are smaller versions, but they're the same thing. These are just bus bars. This is nice if you need to tap in for a lot of grounds, or if you need to top in for a lot of positive battery voltage. These are just terminal strips. I probably won't use these. I'm not really a fan of these. I might have one for some of the interior circuits just to make it easy to get to them. Then you got these standoffs. These will be mounted to the panel where the main ground and main power come in to make them easy to tap into. 100 amp breaker. 100 amp resettable breaker, so if it pops you can just reset it. That'll be for most of the electronics in the cab. This is a pretty slick piece. This is by Leash Electronics, and this is called the Big Dog 2 fuse box. And basically what it is here, let's turn it around. It lets you distribute battery voltage, switched ignition voltage, and ground all in one box. All these here will be filled with fuses, will be populated with fuses. And then on one side you got ignition circuits, so these will be turned off and on with the ignition switch. This side is ground, so those will be constant ground, and that's battery, so those will be hot all the time, and they're all fused. So this makes it nice and compact. It's really nice. You can see it's got a hammer finish powder coat on it. They did a really good job potting it with epoxy, so that's a pretty nice piece. Now comes the part where I splurged entirely. These are by Maven Performance, B2T. It's like burnout to turnout engineering. These are going to be my firewall bulkhead connectors for the engine harness. These are going to be hidden up under the wiper cowl on the firewall, and all the engine harness will pass through these. One of them is 37 pin and the other one is 29 pin. Let me see if I can do this here one hand. They just have a ring you turn. You can see it's keyed and it disconnects. I don't have any of the pins populated yet because I'm not that far. But let me see here. Just push it on. Turn it one full rotation, locks in, and there you go. Very, very nice pieces. There's the back. You do have to have the special Deutsch solid barrel crimpers. You can get them on Amazon for like $200. So all in, if you don't have the crimpers, and it does come with, it comes with the pins. And I ordered 90-degree boots, and I ordered straight boots for it because I'm not sure how I want to configure that yet. But with the boots, the pins, and the crimpers, you're being to it for about $4.25. Definitely not cheap, but it is very, very, very high quality, very good stuff. Let's see. Now this, not so high quality, but this is a 22 pin weather pack style firewall bulkhead. I'm not sure I'm going to use this one. What I'm going to use, if I do use it, what I'm going to do is hide it up in the same location where the factory harness ran through, and run just the headlight wires, maybe the radiator fan, turn signals, and things like that, the horn wires. None of the engine harness will pass through here, nothing like that, so it'll just be the basic circuits. I'll be able to keep it all hidden anyway, so it doesn't really require anything fancy. Definitely nothing like the engine harness. See here, my 8s EB6 style injector plugs. You can buy these with the wires already out, the pigtail style. I don't like those because then you gotta splice into them, and that adds bulk to the harness. Plus then you're switching wire colors, and I just rather have the same wire color code from point A to point B. I got a bunch of connectors. These came from EFIconnection.com. Really good guys to deal with. This is the oil pressure sensor connector, my knock sensor connectors, the alternator connector, basically any connector I need. The only connector I didn't order was for the intake air temp sensor because I just forgot to order it. I'm going to order it and the sensor. So, and headlight switch, some more stuff for my wiring kits. I have a Viper alarm I'm going to put in it. It won't stop the really determined guys, but maybe it'll scare the stupid ones away. Let's see here. Now the wiring harness, I still have a lot to get as far as the actual building of the harness. I'm going to use a really good 3-to-1 heat shrink for the length of the harness. And where the harness Y's off or T's off, I'm going to use heat shrink Ray Kim boots. Basically, they look like molded rubber boots that you would see on a wiring harness. You run the wires through them, and then you heat shrink them around the wiring, and it makes it look like it was molded onto the harness. Really, really slick, really top quality. One thing I'm not going to use that I see guys use that drives me absolute batshit crazy is this crap. Split flex loom. I hate this shit. I cannot stand that stuff. It looks cheesy. The factory or the Mega Squirt harnesses come with it on it. I took all that off. I cannot stand that stuff. It's a pain to work with. It just looks cheap. It's not as flexible, and it deteriorates over time. I can't tell you how many cars I get in where you'll have a wiring harness and you'll just touch that stuff and it just falls off. It just basically turns to dust. And it's a fire hazard. I just don't want it around. So I'm going to heat shrink it like these boots here. You put these boots on, they'll have the heat shrink ran up to them and wrapped it around the harness. I'm going to try my hand at wire braiding. I'm going to try to braid the harness. I'm definitely going to do twisted pairs on a lot of the circuits. So we'll see how that turns out. Let's see. I've got some heat shrink. I've got a couple more rolls of this stuff coming too. I got bigger sizes, like a 1/2 inch and 3/4. If you buy heat shrink, don't buy these little packets here that have like 4 feet in them that they want like $9 for. You can get the whole roll here. This is 100 feet of it. You can buy this whole thing for less than $20. And it's good stuff. It's 3-to-1. It's high temp. Really good stuff. Let's see. This is a generic Jigs 2-inch firewall grommet. I'm going to use this in the cab for my fuel pump wiring, where it runs through the cab, out of the bottom of the cab to the back of the truck. That's what I'm going to use that for. One thing you definitely need to buy if you're going to start wiring your ride is get a good terminal kit. You can see has the good MetroPack connectors, and they have different styles. They have like the MetroPack 150, the 150 GT, the 280, and I think they even have a 450. Let me see here. I have another one, and I do have to buy more of these, but you get the idea. And you get multiple cavities, so you can do they sell these up to like 16 wire. So if you had 16 wires in that circuit, like these right here, these will be what I use. These will probably be the actual ones that I use for my coil harnesses, because each coil bank will have 7 wires, so I'll probably just use these 8 cavities. But you see it comes with the pins, the seals, your little tiny rubber seals for them. These clips, they go on the back of the connector to hold the wires in. It's got the locks, just like the factory, to keep them from coming off. Plugs to plug the empty holes for the not used ones. And I have some more connectors in here that I'll be using, like these. I got 8 of these. These are my coil connectors for the LS2 coils that I have. And then just some other miscellaneous stuff. But definitely the way to go. It's much cheaper. Even the cheap MetroPack connectors, you're still talking $10-15 a connector, versus that set there was like $90, and this one here was like $50. So you're definitely come out ahead. Yeah, I think that probably does it. So I've got some other stuff coming. I'm getting real close to ordering my fuel system. That'll be coming from Orme Brothers, ORME brothers.com. That'll be pretty slick. Yeah, so I'm just pretty much squirreling away parts right now. So hope you like the update. Thanks.